Hark the bardic paladin, who sings and plays again. He tells the tales of glory and weaves a magic story. He'll join you at your table and ask you to share a fable. Heroes of humble origin, villains who must be fought again. No matter their skill or prowess, the people in life are countless. So we pray you heed our request. Enjoy this tale of sidekicks and side quests.
Episode 112, Levity Butterleaf, the Common Tongue Teacher. Welcome to Sidekicks and Side Quests, the Dungeons & Dragons podcast that helps to put humans back into humanity and breathe life into your campaign NPCs with backstory and bravado. That's right, we're building a world, one character at a time. I am your host, Kurt Krenwelge, the Bardic Paladin, and I'll be joining Leigha Murray's table in the Levitating Platter. And hello, welcome to another exciting episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests, the best unofficial Dungeons & Dragons podcast, in my humbly biased opinion. I've got a wonderful returning guest for you this week. I got to give you my ad read from Plus One EXP. Tony Vicinda, you heard just a couple of episodes ago, is the mastermind behind this mastercraft of beard balms and lip balms and lotions and game design and community building and all this good stuff. So if you have a beard, if you have lips that are parched or chapped, you should consider going to his site. You might be able to find something that might increase your strength, dexterity, charisma, or more, and just make your skin and hair feel great. Of course, the whole thing that launched this brand was his independent tabletop role-playing game called Beards and Beyond, which you can pick up on his site. But then this also led into an endeavor with Tony collaborating on several other projects, including Repugnant, iToaster, Down We Go, Through the Void, Vamp Nugula, and Brandstanding, just to name a few. So if you support Plus One EXP, either by buying something on their website, going to the itch page, it all helps funnel into the Plus One Forward program, which seeks to support additional indie tabletop content creators to continue making awesome stuff. So I would highly encourage you to follow both Tony and Plus One EXP on all of the various multitudes of social media platforms, Twitter/X, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Discord, in order to keep up with all the various projects that are being worked on, as well as upcoming interviews and one-shots and actual plays, and just learning more about this awesome community of people making awesome games. So, if you don't mind, when you go to the website, plus1exp.com, and you see that discount code box, be sure to type in the code Randolph at checkout. It's not going to cost you anything. It's just going to give you a discount, and it's going to give me a little bit of a kickback, which I certainly appreciate. So again, that code is Randolph at checkout on the website, plus1exp.com. Well, hello, mystery contestant. It's so awesome to have you back on. And for new listeners of the show who maybe haven't had the opportunity to go through the back catalog, just because we're over at 100 episodes now, but would you mind reintroducing yourself? Tell us who it is that you are and what is it that you do?
Hi guys, my name is Leah, and I have dual roles. I work full-time for an insurance broker, doing very boring things like copying and pasting all day. And then I work part-time at my family's massage studio as a front desk associate. So you will see me before and after your massage, which is always a fun time.
Yeah, so if I recall from last episode, you're doing the same similar sorts of things that you were doing last time. And before we got the microphones recording, you just explained to me some massage studio industry things that had happened during the pandemic, which, is certainly an interesting podcast all on its own, not to bore our listeners with those details. But you've been good since the last time we spoke, because I remember, you were one of the many people who accepted an invitation to try your hand on my new podcast. And we probably recorded sometime in the May 2020 region, most likely is when our episode was actually recorded. And then I remember working on your episode. Actually, my son had just been born it was the snowpocalypse, and I'm at my in-laws' house desperately trying to edit the episode. Meanwhile, I've got a newborn that I'm trying to take care of while the power's cycling on and off. So it was a whole time.
Oh yeah, I actually was just looking at it. So we recorded in June,
Oh, wow.
while I was still living at my apartment,
Hmm.
which I have since moved out of. I now
Okay.
live in a house like 5 minutes from where my apartment was, which was fun because went from 2 girls in a 2 bedroom apartment to 3 girls in a 2 bedroom apartment because my other sister moved in with us, and so it was time to go.
Hmm.
So I've since moved since our last time that we spoke, and I spent Snowpocalypse at my house, which was nice.
Hmm.
I've since adopted a puppy, which is another reason that I'm glad that I am recording from my dad's house today because
Mm.
my dog likes to bark at any and everything that moves.
Hmm.
So you would certainly be just hearing a crazy dog the entire time.
Mm. Also, as well, I'm a new dog owner as well. So Bishop has now joined our family, and he's a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel.
Oh, cute. I have he's a pit terrier American cattle dog mix.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I like to say he is very cute, secretly evil, and all the spaz you could possibly handle.
Mm.
So
Okay.
he's he's adorable. He's brave and a coward at the same time. He'll bark to protect you, but as soon as it makes a noise back, he's like, "You know, where my mom. You got this. I'm good."
Classic.
Oh
Classic.
yeah.
Yeah. And so, since the last time we spoke, I know for those who remember from your episode before, you explained your history or your involvement with the hobby, that you had had the opportunity possibly to try and play the game, but then your initial invitation was never given, with the grognards at the game store you would frequent and go to. After that episode you did with me, I felt the spirit, the fire within, and you were like, okay, well, maybe I should go and try and find a game. And so I have to ask, have you been able to play Dungeons and Dragons or some other similar sort of tabletop role playing game since the last time we spoke?
So unfortunately, I have not because, as I also mentioned in our previous podcast, I have a problem with the word no. So I
Hmm.
ended up falling into, well, first I got jury duty.
Mm.
And then my family's massage studio, we went from being a franchise to being an independent business. So there
Hmm.
was a lot of turnover with that. I got grand jury duty on top of that. And then I signed
Whoa.
up for a leadership course, which only wrapped up, I want to say, about 3, 4 months ago.
Mm.
Um, and so it's just been a lot of that. But I did do something, not necessarily exactly like D&D, but I went to an anime convention back in January,
Okay.
and I was introduced to steampunk RPG, which I
Okay.
got to participate at while I was there with actually another college friend that you may know, Nicole McDonald. I don't know if you remember her.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yes.
I've bumped into her, like, the Scarborough Renaissance Fair happens in the Dallas Metroplex area. And so, yeah, I always seem to bump into her there whenever that's going on. And so, yeah, I've seen her around the Metroplex a couple times.
Yeah, I think the Scarborough Fair, I think she was helping with a steampunk
Mm.
group that was there. So I think it's actually the same group, and they had a few panels at IkiCon. So I ended up running into her there
Hmm.
and getting to participate and got to create a whole character from scratch. And I think I was assigned a name, and then I just kind of got to build off of the character there, and that was a lot of fun. Getting to make it
Mm.
up on the fly with other people that had never done it before.
Mm.
So I expressed an interest in that, and of course, once again, got busy. So it's a
Mm.
matter of just trying to find that balance. We're running a 4-person front desk crew right now, so that doesn't really allow a lot of time
Mm.
for getting out there, but we're hoping to hire somebody soon, and hopefully I'll be able to jump into that.
There you go. Yeah. Or maybe even, I know there's a multitude of podcasts and actual plays and all these other sorts of things. So, if you are wanting to or desiring to perhaps join a game or a group somewhere, maybe that'll be like an inspiration point. Because I remember the last time we were talking, it was in the midst of the pandemic. And, I remember theater major background. And so you were like, oh, it's so devastating that all the shows that I can't go to right now. So, maybe that's been an inspiration point along the way now that some of the normalcy of the pre-pandemic times has returned.
Yeah, I'm definitely able to get out and go out and do more stuff. I actually just recently connected with another college friend who did his first stand-up show in Austin, so I got to go see that, which was really cool.
Was it LaRoyal?
No, his name is Carter.
Oh, okay.
If you'd been around the theater department, he's super tall African American gentleman who has since gotten a lot of TikTok fame. So if you're looking for,
Oh, we'll have to throw that in the show notes so then he can continue to grow his TikTok empire.
oh yeah, if you come across Carter Anderson comedy on TikTok, he's the guy that does the thing where Taco Bell will jump in and steal somebody's slogan, and they usually yell at him that is not his slogan. That would be my friend Carter. So
Okay. All right. Very cool. Yeah. Keeping on with the theme of the podcast and the show, have you come across any new or interesting sidekick characters, NPCs, from a show, from a play, from a game, etc.? And why is this particular sidekick character stuck out with you?
still a massive fan of Mortal Kombat, which I unfortunately did not see the movie and have not had a chance to see it yet.
I have not seen the movie either.
But I did do a lot of watching of like the gameplays and just watching in story mode.
Hmm.
And I don't remember the name of the character. It's sort of like a twofer. I guess it's not necessarily that they're an NPC character that has it's like a symbiotic relationship. So it's two characters in one, and they just have this little
Oh,
teeny tiny character person on their back. And I
okay.
mostly I don't know, just something about it is if I remember correctly, they're supposed to be like from a group that was enslaved and then like they broke free. But I have to go back into that whole lore, and this was like a 6 hour video watch that I was on, and I'm only in no, it's an 11 hour video, and I'm on like hour four. So
Oh, the deep lore of Mortal
yeah,
Kombat.
it's super deep, but just something about them has been just sort of, I guess, like the relationship, how they work together to
Hmm.
achieve a common goal, and it's something about the character just sticks out with me. Especially if you go and watch, there's a video where you can watch all of their interactions, like when they first meet for fights,
Hmm.
and in the video they have them going up against themselves, and it's just this one little thing where they're just like, "Why you look like we? Why do you look like we?" And I don't know why. It's just super funny, but they just kind of stick in my mind. So right now they're kind of like my favorite. Can't remember their name, but they are super cute. So that's why they stick out for me right now. But also that whole, like I said, the symbiotic relationship where like they have to work together is kind of
Hmm.
cool.
Okay. And then going along with the theme as well, what's been an interesting or new favorite side quests that you've come across, either from game, movie, film, television, etc.? And why is this side quest, this B plot element stuck out with you?
Well, so I've gotten into the show 911,
Okay.
that and Lone Star, but primarily in the Flagstaff series with Angela Bassett,
Okay.
her and the guy that played her husband. So it's throughout the episode, usually there's one main storyline, and if the police get involved, there's always some kind of mystery. Since her and her husband have gotten together, despite the fact that she's a police captain and he is a fire chief, somehow he always ends up involved in helping her solve her crimes. And so it's sort of like their little date night. So like you have your main thing, like here's this big fire because this big crater opened up in the middle of the city. While that's all happening, we're gonna go solve our own little crime over here off to the side. And just watching the two of them work together is fascinating, hilarious, and just everything you want in like a random side quest about a show about fires.
I was gonna say, I think I tend to see those videos in the Facebook videos, where the people have obviously edited over it and then they're just reposting it for the ad revenue or whatever. But yeah, it always seems interesting to me, when especially if it's like the Texas, the Lone Star one, or I understand that it's supposed to take place in Austin. So the idea of like magma filled craters opening up in Austin just sounds super plausible. I mean, I know it's hot here, but is it really that hot in Austin that magma is just pouring forth from beneath the surface?
There's been a couple of days where it's come close, and they actually had an episode that was set in San Angelo.
Our old college town.
Oh yeah, which I immediately was like, false. There's no mountains in San Angelo.
Yeah, there's Twin Buttes. That's about it.
Yeah, but like they were showing like these beautiful mountains. I was like, yeah, no, there's no snow-covered mountains in San Angelo, but like brush fires, that is a thing. Which
Yes.
that's what the episode was surrounded around, like a brush fire or like a big.
Well, I'm sure during our college years, we had to deal with a number of those that would happen out in West Texas.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think 2012 was like the worst of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there was like a brief time where they were like, "Hey, you may have to evacuate campus in like an hour. Be ready to go."
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like it was just watching. It was just like mountains, no fire, yes, accurate, great.
It's always fun when they reference like an actual place that you've lived or been to, and then you compare it to the actual shooting locations where they go, and it's like, this is they did not film on location.
Yeah,
And then finally, to round out the personal interview section, have you come across any new hobbies? Have you developed any new passions? And what are they?
I am constantly coming across hobbies. So I am currently trying to teach myself. It started out wanting to learn one language, and I'm now signed up for 8 of them on Duolingo.
Whoa.
Because they're all languages I've wanted to learn, and I figure why not? So we are trying to brush up on Spanish. We're trying to learn French. Swahili was the original goal.
Mm.
Then we discovered Esperanto,
Okay.
and then Irish, Gaelic. I think I have German on there, right? And then because I couldn't have the opportunity to learn a nerdy language and not take advantage, so we are also trying to learn High Valerian from
Game of
Game of
Thrones?
Thrones. Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
Creole. That's the other one that I was
Oh,
trying to learn.
Creole.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and I have a friend that's actually from Haiti, so she doesn't know it yet. She's about to be my study buddy. So
Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong in trying to be a nerd about all things Marvel Cinematic and everything. My understanding with Black Panther is that the Wakandan language is partially based off of Swahili.
I don't know. I haven't read anything about that, but I would believe it
Mm-hmm.
just because it's the most common language you hear probably in that region would be like around Swahili.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also Swahili is one of the easier languages to learn because
Interesting.
it's the way that the word is spelled is how it sounds. So,
Oh, very, that's very good.
yeah.
Why are there a bunch of silent letters here, like in French? It's like I have 10 letters, but it only sounds like one syllable or something.
I wouldn't necessarily say that they're silent. It's more so that they're very quick. For instance, if you're wanting to say I am American, or if you want to just say American, because that's where it comes in. So when you're stating like your nationality or something,
Mhm.
it has a random letter in before you get to the rest of the word. So like
Mhm.
if you're saying I am Kenyan, you're saying McKenyan or McKenya.
Hmm.
And then like I'm from Tanzania, Tanzanian, or I'm American, American, which that random in just always feels really weird to say and kind of like you're mumbling, but
Mhm.
it's supposed to be there. So it's a very interesting language and having fun learning it. So
That's awesome. I was gonna say one of my heroes, Saint Pope John Paul II, was also a very world-renowned polyglot. And the last I remembered, Saint John Paul II, I think they said he spoke like 27 different languages. So you're well on your way if you wanted to brush up with greatness in that way.
oh, we are definitely trying. I think my inspiration for that was I think there was like an 8-year-old girl who was like 13 languages in. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be outshone by an 8-year-old. We're going to keep trying until I figure it out. But then I also tend to get distracted by other things. Like I pick up hobbies like you're picking up socks or something. I'm just like, oh, this sounds cool. Let's pick that up. So that is partly why I get distracted or why sometimes things get pushed to the background is because I'll be like, I'm doing this. Oh, but this also looks fun. It's like eventually I come back around to it. I'm always thinking about getting out there to do D&D, especially now that the movie has come out,
Yeah.
reinforce that. And the 2 friends that I had that were playing D&D, I think their group went on hiatus for a bit, and now those 2 girls have their own podcast. And so I was like, okay, well, clearly you guys aren't my end, so now I got to find another way in, and I'll find that out eventually.
Well, it's been great catching up in this personal interview section of the show that I think it's time to head into some NPC creation. And NPC creation, of course, is brought to you by you, podcast audience, and our patrons from Patreon. That's right, now is the time in the show where we give a shout out to our comfortable patrons and above with a loud hurrah. So cheers to all of you, our aristocratic tier member, Goblin Katie, Katie Downey, and then our other wealthy level patrons, including my parents, Nicholas Cardarelli, and my good buddy, Anson Jablinski. We say cheers to all of you. So again, you can get your own shout out, your own loud hurrah on the podcast by becoming one of our comfortable level patrons. That's $2 a month. The higher you go, it also means wealthy patrons and above also get to introduce an element of chance to our random tables, which we're most likely going to be using here today. And so you might get to hear their responses. So if you want to learn more and join the Levitating Platters podcast community, go to the show notes below, go to the podcast website, or just go directly to patreon.com/sidekicks and side quests to find out about our tiers of membership and help us expand our operations at the Levitating Platter in this demiplane and worlds beyond. All right, so we were discussing before we started rolling that you wanted to roll the dice once again randomly to let the fates guide you in character creation today. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So whether you have your dice virtually, physically, or metaphysically, which would be interesting how you would manage to have dice in that manner, but regardless, we need to first determine the name of our character. And of course, the way that we do that is by rolling a d20.
And I got a 6.
6. Okay. Your answer was provided by previous guest Dane Fox McGraw, Levity Butterleaf.
Oh.
So we've got that going for us. And then we need to determine the ancestry of our character. And so we'll determine this by rolling 2d10s for a d100 effect.
So I got a 9 and a 4.
So that would be 94, which is going to be, interesting. Okay, so you've got a choice here. So you can do vampire, dhampir, or stirogi. So
Ooh.
vampire, obviously self-explanatory. A dhampir is like a half vampire, and then a stirogi is basically like if you imagine a mosquito monster, but you combine it with the Jeff Goldblum's The Fly after he goes through the transporter.
I actually knew what all of these were.
Oh, awesome.
So I would like to go with the Dhampir.
Okay, dhampir. So Levity Butterleaf, the dhampir. What is the job or role in society for Levity Butterleaf? If you would like to roll just a regular d10, we'll figure that out.
And we got another 6.
Another 6. Okay, interesting. Your answer is provided by our Patreon supporter, Anson Jablinski, common tongue teacher. So, like the basic assumed Franqua lingua of the world, Levity Butterleaf is a common tongue teacher, like an ESL kind of instructor.
Okay.
And then let's see, the other thing we get to roll for before we take a slight pause on the dice rolling is we need to determine the age range of our character. And we'll do this with a d8.
And we have a 4.
4 would be adult.
All right.
Now that we have these details in mind, with the name of Levity Butterleaf, we know dhampir, we know common tongue teacher, and we know adult. So with all these things in mind, if you had to describe the physical appearance of Levity Butterleaf, what comes to mind?
So is Levity a male or female?
Whatever you're feeling.
Okay, I feel like Levity is a female name.
Okay.
So,
See, and it was really interesting because we chose Dhampir with the name of Levity Butterleaf. I was like, oh, is this one of those things where it's like a lycanthrope? And so technically you could be whatever, and then you transform into the lycanthrope. I was trying to figure out if Dhamphirs, mechanically speaking, were going to be their own unique species, if you will, or if it was like, oh, I could be like a halfling, but I'm really a Dhampir halfling. And I was just trying to read through some stuff real quick, and it's telling us poised between the worlds of the living and the dead, Dhamphirs retain their grip on life, yet are endlessly tested by vicious hungers. Their ties to the undead grant Dhamphirs a taste of a vampire's deathless prowess in the form of increased speed, dark vision, and a life-draining bite. With unique insights into the nature of the undead, many Dhamphirs become adventurers and monster hunters. Their reasons are often deeply personal. Some seek danger, imagining monsters as personifications of their own hungers. Others pursue revenge against whatever turned them into a Dhampir, and still others embrace the solitude of the hunt, striving to distance themselves from those who tempt their hunger. So if we're imagining a Dhampir, obviously there's a story with how Levity came to be a half vampire, but in the physical description, and maybe if you wanted to randomly generate another ancestry, or unless the name Levity Butterleaf brings something to mind. I'm just curious. Like, to me, my personal opinion, which we don't have to go with, Levity Butterleaf reminds me of like a halfling. Is Levity like a halfling Dhampir or like a dwarven Dhampir? I don't know. Or a gnome? What do you imagine?
So, based on your description, because I tend to associate a lot with things that I already know or like pop culture, and it immediately made me think of Blade.
Okay. Oh, great example. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
um,
Daywalker.
exactly. And that's kind of what I was thinking of because I've also, there's a book series that I read where they don't necessarily become a hunter, but there's a similar characteristic of like of in the vampire lore. It is something called a rook.
Okay.
They still retain a lot of their human aspect. It's not full vampire,
Mm-hmm.
and that's done by choice. So you can either become a full vampire, which means your heart stops, you're dead, you have the bloodlust and everything, or you
Mm.
have the rook, which has the same, like they can walk in the sun, they have the same lifespan as a vampire, but they're just not. They're more or less straddling both worlds.
Mm.
So yeah, I kind of want have like sort of like that, sort of like a rook where vampiristic tendencies, but with the ability to sort of walk between the worlds.
And so, with the Blade reference, which is excellent, are you imagining Levity is a human or was a human and then became this Dhampir? Or, like I was positing, a halfling or a gnome or a dwarf or some other fantasy race or the like?
I see Levity as more like someone who became, so was originally human and
Okay.
was maybe attacked by a vampire, but for whatever reason the process was just not completed.
Ooh, okay. Now that I understand, and again, now that I have the Blade thing coming into mind, does she kind of have that same sort of physical characteristic vibe? She's dressing in leather and has like an interesting haircut and wears shades and carries around swords all the time while she's a common tongue teacher, or does she look different than that?
I would say she looks different. She's not so much like she's not overtly a hunter, like in that hunter-esque form. I would say
Mhm.
like because she is trying to blend in.
Okay.
She is the teacher. I see her as more just kind of dressed as like the common everyman, but there's maybe just something about her that tends to make people notice her more.
Hmm.
So it could just be like maybe her clothes are just a little bit more, not necessarily edgy, but it's just like she's common, but there's just something different. Like maybe, most of the women in her area are wearing dresses and she's got like a half dress pants situation going on.
Isn't there like a style of clothing, modern clothing now that's called like tech wear or something like that, where it looks like very business chic, but it also looks like something that could be out of the Matrix or something like that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think
But
of
the
like,
fantasy version equivalent of that, like you were describing, like a pant dress situation, like, oh,
yes.
you look like a proper, respectable lady. However, you look also like an adventurer, so you could just drop everything at a moment's notice and go fight danger or something like that.
Yeah. So I'm thinking from Once Upon a Time,
Okay.
and it's sort of a cross between, because the Evil Queen has an outfit that's very similar to what I'm thinking of, where it's could very easily be. It's got like flowing, kind of like a coat with tails,
Okay.
but it's a the top is sort of like it sits around her like a dress, but she has pants. So like when she's walking, it flows behind her like a dress would, but she's got the pants, so it's sort of like a we're classy, but we could also fight at a moment's notice if needed.
Okay, so she's wearing that. Is there anything else that would be notable as far as her physical description goes, her physical appearance?
I would say that because she's sort of like between the worlds, it's almost like she has a glow around her. Like it's not overt like shining glow, but it's just like a very faint like something's different.
Hmm.
Almost like a yeah, like a glow or like a shimmer that's just like shines just maybe a little bit brighter than like normal people.
Not quite Twilight territory where they're like sparkly vampires, but there's
Yeah.
just as someone who, whose wife has been pregnant and had a child, it's like, the maternal glow of pregnancy and stuff like that. So it's almost like that, but she's not necessarily pregnant or anything. It's because she's a dhampir. So she's got like this otherworldly attractiveness to
Yes.
her.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Just words are not communicating properly today.
Sure, no, that's fine. I'm just trying to help understand the character. So you actually do envision her as like a monster hunter of sorts, but her day job cover is that, oh, she's the common tongue language teacher in this community. And, she's using that as an opportunity to pick up like hints or leads as to like where supernatural activity is occurring. So then she can go out there and combat it and stuff like that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Now my brain keeps jumping to Buffy the Vampire Slayer because she more or less does the same like towards the end of the series. But yeah, it's like something like that, like using her day job to sort of blend in and
And if we had to describe levity with three adjectives, what three adjectives would you use?
vigilant, which would make sense given that she has that hunter-esque type style. But also, part of me wants to say friendly, but also I want to say open. Approachable. They are aware that she's sort of more. So I think approachable would be the best word because people are aware that they like there's just something more about her, but they're not
Hmm.
afraid to approach her. Which given that she is a teacher, like you don't want to be afraid of your teacher or like unwilling to go near them. But
Hmm.
it also helps with her being sort of like a hunter-esque type of person.
So we've got vigilant, we've got approachable, and then what's the third adjective?
I'd say kind because kind can do a lot. One of those things that you can do a lot with, like you can show, like your kindness can allow you to show mercy towards people, but can also mean you're more willing to help if the situation arises for it. So kind, I think, is the third one I'd like to use.
And then, of course, all our NPCs have to have cool things on them. So, what's going to be a valuable item, piece of lore, a secret, or an ideal or concept that Levity would ascribe to? We'll do the combo roll of the D4 first and then the D6.
So for the D4, we have a 2, and for the D6, we have a 1.
Okay, excellent. So your piece of lore was provided today by previous guest Stephanie Jones. Levity knows who all the corrupt government officials are.
Nice. All the power.
I mean, is this something that she's just picking up through the course of being the common language teacher in the community and that she's just picked this up, or just through the course of her doing her vigilante type work? She just happens to know the wider network of who all the corrupt officials are in the government and is sanctioning and allowing this chaos to continue.
I would say that her being the common language teacher has a lot to do with that, just because even in by like today's standards, teachers aren't really regarded as like threats. So I feel like people would be, especially with her being so approachable, people would
Hmm.
be more willing to talk in front of her, and that may lead, like the
Mm.
things that she overhears would then lead into her like being like vigilantism and like going out and finding out more about that to keep in the banks for later.
I have an interesting question. I was trying to imagine a scenario in my head. And as you were explaining in the personal interview section, how you've taken up this new hobby of trying to become a polyglot, if you will, learning all these different languages.
Hmm.
What languages do you think Levity knows? Obviously, she has to be a proficient in being able to help people to learn common. So I'm just kind of interested what you're thinking about, so she's a human or, appears as a human. Are there any interesting ones like basic common fantasy ones in D&D end up being like halfling, dwarven, elvish, and then you've got like orcish and goblin, some of these other ones. So I'm just kind of interested if she's like a polyglot and she just happens to know a lot of languages, or, she knows like a couple of them and then those are the primary sorts of communities that she's serving in this area. or you're just going to leave it open to whoever decides to use this character can determine what languages she'll know.
I like to think that she's maybe a polyglot. Just polyglots are, in my opinion, like a very rare breed of people
Hmm.
because it takes a certain type of person to be able to know and distinguish between all these different languages. And especially being a dhampir, there's no telling how long she's been around or like how long she's been a dhampir. So
True.
I would imagine she's picked up several languages over the course of her lifetime.
In the scenario I was playing in my head, we're imagining, oh, these corrupt government officials, and if it's like a metropolis sort of environment, and so you have like the two hobgoblins that are talking and goblin after the language lessons are done, and they talked about, oh, we finally moved to this city, we got a better chance of a life, but they're just like, oh, this magistrate is really tough on us hobgoblins, prejudicial or unfair biases and stuff. Our rents are super high when they don't need to be, or other type of things like that. And so then she's picking that up and understanding like, I might need to go talk to this magistrate and see if he has any connections going on with the vampires or whatever monsters are lurking in the area.
I think it would definitely be in that kind of situation, just because again, it would help in the fact that like she's is out there, sort of in hunter mode, but also with her being one of those people willing to be out there and helping, like someone's got to take on that role of being a
Mhm.
helper, and so if I have this ability to like get this information, why not use it to my advantage? And no one ever thinks like, oh, like she's just if she's just a common language teacher, I would imagine that she's living in an area where like you don't have a lot of people that speak multiple languages. So they're just
Mhm.
comfortable speaking whatever language they assume that she wouldn't, because not a lot of people would know, like
Sure.
Portuguese or something like that.
And it's interesting, this whole scenario of a common language teacher, because I was recently a guest on a podcast called Dispel Magic, and we discussed the 5e spell called Hallow, which is you basically consecrate a 60-foot radius area, and you can have a number of different effects occur. And so one of the effects is called tongues, which allows everyone to speak in that area and everyone can hear each other and understand. So we posited in that episode, like, oh, well, I mean, if you take this thing to its logical conclusion, then you probably have, centers and civilizations where this is how people were able to develop a common language in the first place, because they had a designated zone where they could all sit down together and be like, okay, well, this is how you would say this word in this language, in this language, in this language. What's the closest approximation between all the vowels and consonants and percussive elements and stuff that we can manufacture with our vocal cords and lips and tongue and teeth in order to make a closer approximation into a common language. So the fact that Levity is a common language teacher, to me, stands to reason that she lives in an area that's either going to be various different cultures coming together, impoverished, not having access to some magical effect or something like that that would allow people to easily be able to communicate, which would necessitate the reason why she would be there teaching in the first place, which is
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting. So like a fantasy New York City, except they don't really have much need of magic-y stuff of that nature. Oh, any magic-y stuff that can help us get a buck or something like that, that's cool. But investing in the infrastructure to help people learn languages, we'll just hire people to teach common. That's a more effective use of our time than having a cleric spend 24 hours for a single day to cast a area where everyone could just speak all the same language or whatever.
Yeah. I'm actually there's a book series that I've read that has a similar world like that, where they live in a kingdom that's surrounded by other kingdoms that speak multiple languages, and the
Hmm.
common language that they're trying to get everyone to speak is called Harken.
Okay.
But they're still like in the process of like trying to get people to learn it, and so they have what are called silver tongues, which would essentially be the polyglots.
Hmm.
um, One of the main characters in the first book gets referred to as a golden tongue because he knows 12 languages as opposed to like the 3 or 4 that most silver tongues know.
Ooh.
They have a situation where there's the common language that these two groups of people know is Harken, but like one group only speaks a little bit of, or no, it's called Farlander, but there's like a similar language called Outlander, and so there's all this confusion that ends up happening because they only know like bits and pieces of one language, but there's not that one common. So
Hmm.
it's interesting that you thought about that, because that's what I was thinking while we were talking about this. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So hopefully it gives our listeners out there a good context, a good environment that you could stick Levity into your campaign. Or, I don't know, could be even interesting idea that just popped up. If Levity is a tutor, like maybe like a rich dwarven society, or I don't know, like some far alien realm or kingdom that doesn't know common, and so they only know their language, but Levity speaks it, and so, oh, I'm the tutor that's going to be here in this community teaching the nobles and the merchants and whoever need to know how to speak common in order to be able to communicate with the wider world or something like that.
Yeah, that would also be a good one.
And to go along with the namesake of our show, all of our NPCs got to have a side quest to give out. So at this point, you can roll the last dice, which is going to be the D12, to randomly generate a side quest. Or if you're inspired, just go ahead and lay out on us what you think a side quest Levity would be willing to offer a group of player characters to go and do. Or if you want to do a combination of both, you could do that as well.
Does a dhampir, being that they are halfling, like let's say if it was a vampire,
Mm-hmm.
are dhampirs typically solo creatures, like solitary, like on their own, or do they have like their own community? Do you know?
Well, according to the text that I saw, and this comes from it comes from an internet resource page, but it's quoting the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. It says that some seek danger, imagining monsters as personifications of their own hungers. Others pursue revenge against whatever turned them into a dhampir, and still others embrace the solitude of the hunt, striving to distance themselves from those who tempt their hunger. And then let's see, it's got a random table as to, let's see, your hunger. While many Dampirs thirst for blood, your character might otherwise gain sustenance from the living. Roll on or choose from an option from the Dampier Hungers table to determine what tempts your character to feed. So, blood, flesh, or raw meat, cerebral spinal fluid, psychic energy, dreams, or life energy were some of the ones it gave. And then, as far as the origins are concerned, some possible origins. And again, this is the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, so this gives you the player character options if you're going to play a Dhampir. And the NPC quote monster manual version might be a little bit different, but
Mhm.
some particular origins. For example, you are the reincarnation of an ancestor who has a vampiric tyrant. Your pact with a predatory deity, fiend, fae, or spirit causes you to share their hunger. You survived being attacked by a vampire, but were forever changed, which is kind of what we had discussed earlier.
Mhm.
Parasite lives inside you. You indulge its hunger. Tragedy interrupted your transformation into an immortal. You are a diminished form of an otherworldly being. Slaking your hunger hastens your renewal. One of your parents was a vampire. A radical experiment changed your body, making you reliant on others for vital fluids. Um, if you wanted to, at this point in the game, kind of change the perspective or the origin, I suppose, of Levity, and then maybe how that affects her either pursuit of community or similar people or whatnot.
I think I want to roll first and see what that idea brings.
Sure.
So we have a 4.
4. Okay, interesting. Your answer provided by previous guest, Firewriter. Go deal with a person with whom they have a grudge against.
Okay, so this actually kind of leans a little bit towards what I was thinking of. So, as a side quest, I'm working off the assumption that Levity has been around for quite a while.
Okay.
And so she would either want to complete the transition or completely reverse it.
Ooh, okay.
So my thought process on this is the side quest would be that she has word on where her potential sire could be,
Okay.
and their side quest would be that they have to bring him to her.
So basically, it's go hunt for a vampire and capture the vampire, quote unquote, alive and bring that vampire to Levity.
Yes.
Ooh, okay. This is an interesting side quest. Okay. So if the players are successful in being able to capture a vampire without him turning into mist and disappearing or just TPKing the party,
Yeah.
what's going to be the reward for the side quest?
Let's see. Reward. I feel like if you're capturing a vampire, it has to be a pretty big one.
I would imagine so.
It's I don't want to do what we did. I think last time what the reward was that something they needed for their campaign.
Yeah, your last character that you made with a skink nose the Lich Beekeeper, the reward was a valuable item that you needed in your campaign, which is perfect if you're just drag and dropping Skink Nose into your campaign without any necessary tie specifically to whatever you got going. But yeah, I could see where maybe you want to make sure that the reward is specific and worthwhile with Levity. Yeah.
I'm thinking the reward would be something that allows you to bring back a fallen player.
Okay, interesting. So are you thinking like a scroll? Well, let's see. Revivify is the spell that if it, like they died within a minute, then you can bring them back. And then there's resurrection, and then there's like true resurrection. True resurrection is like the super powerful one that they can be dead for like 200 years and you can resurrect them, back to life. But resurrection would be like, okay, someone's been dead, it's been longer than a minute, and we need to like bring this person back to life.
I would do resurrection because I feel like capturing a vampire is huge, but not like let's bring somebody back from like 200 years huge.
Resurrection, a 7th level necromancy spell. Let's see, vocal, somatic components. So a diamond worth at least 1,000 gold pieces. So having a scroll of resurrection is definitely, I would say, definitely a big reward for the undertaking of capturing a vampire. As you were explaining, she's kind of in this middle ground state of, is she going to want to continue the process and fully turn into a vampire? Or is she trying to like be made a human again? And so I was just curious if you're thinking story wise was like, oh, she tried a resurrection scroll before on her and it didn't work or something like that. So maybe that's why she has just an extra one of these laying around.
Yeah, I would think so. 'Cause I imagine that when she became Dhampir, it was probably, because again, I'm assuming that at this point she's been around for many years, which means
Hmm.
she probably watched friends and loved ones pass.
Hmm.
And so she would have tried to reverse the effects previously, which would be why she has that resurrection scroll. And with it not working, she's like, okay, well, these are the hands that I've dealt. Let me use this to my advantage. But now she's at a point where, it's not enough. And so she's torn between ending it there or doing full transition so she can do more.
Interesting. Okay. And then I just imagine it's probably a conversation or something with Levity. Then maybe the player characters are able to either persuade her to take one particular course of action or not, depending on like their reasoning or how persuasive they are. You think maybe?
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Okay. And I just looked it up just to double check it, but a standard vampire in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition has a challenge rating of 13. So it definitely is not an easy feat to try and capture a vampire to bring to Levity. So I think a scroll of resurrection is definitely a pretty great reward, along with the fact that you probably have a very fabled monster hunter as an ally of the party in some shape or form, I
Yeah.
imagine. And then, of course, we need to consider the opposite. What's going to be the consequence of failure or refusing the call to the adventure? I mean, there's probably some obvious ones, but are there any other ones that you're thinking of that could come into play? Because obviously, going after a vampire is no short order. And so it's very easily that the players all get wiped out by a vampire because they went in, their guns half loaded and no plan. And they were like, yeah, let's just bag a vampire. Oh, this fight is way tougher than we anticipated. And most of us are dead, kind of a
Full Leroy Jenkins it.
thing.
Gosh, what would be good? Hmm.
And maybe to clarify as far as the failure condition is concerned, because I suppose there's a difference of like, oh, we fought him and we tried to get him, but he escaped, and they report back to her on that, or failure in the sense of like, oh, we were so good at our job that we actually just killed him. Like we didn't like this vampire. Maybe there's a plot reason, and like, oh, this vampire is actually a very oppressive figure, and some main plot or some other side quest needs you to kill him. And so they failed the side quest in the regards of instead of bringing him to Levity, they just kill the vampire. What's going to be the consequence of that?
Mm. I would say, do Dampiers have the ability to also initiate like a transition?
According to the player character version, they have an ability called Vampiric Bite. So your Fanged Bite is a natural weapon, which counts as a simple melee, which you're proficient in. You add your Constitution modifier instead of your Strength modifier to the attack and damage rolls. Blah 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 blah. So it's like a bite. When you attack with this bite and hit a creature that isn't a construct or undead, you can empower yourself in one of the following ways. You regain hit points equal to the piercing damage dealt by the bite. You gain a bonus to the next ability check or attack roll you make. The bonus equals the piercing damage dealt by the bite. You can empower yourself with this bite a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Okay, so basically, you can kind of like buff yourself a little bit. Let's see, deathless nature, you don't need to breathe. Spider climb, you have a climbing speed equal to your walking speed. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so those are the main things. So not like a full vampire. There's no like, oh, I can transform into an animal or I can turn into a swarm of bats and fly off into the night sky. And obviously, I'm not vulnerable to silver, running water, or daylight or anything like that.
Would they have the ability to turn someone? Like, also turn them?
Not the player character version. Okay, challenge rating 1 as far as the monster version is concerned. Let's see, Dark Thirst. So that is some sort of bite thing that happens. And then you do necrotic damage, predatory charm, magically beguiles the mind of one humanoid. Let's see, blood ties, inner darkness. Dhamphirs are the half-living children of vampires and living mothers, born into a world that fears and rejects them. Thanks to their human-like appearance, many dhamphirs hide in plain sight, spending their lives concealing their abilities. Okay, so even looking at the monster version, I'm not seeing anything here that indicates like, oh, you have to, if they bite you, you have to save against turning into a vampire. So no, Dhamphirs do not, as far as I can tell, have the in writing ability to turn someone into a vampire. But it's your game, it's your table. If you wanted to make it so that Dhamphirs could change people into vampires or at least other Dhamphirs, I suppose you could allow that if you wanted to.
So, what I'm thinking then is not necessarily turning them, but I did remember hearing that, like, if I fed off of someone, it could increase ability or just sort of give me like a boost. So, as if they were to fail, then I would say they'd have to leave one of their party behind, essentially for me to use as like a power boost.
Oh, okay. So kind of reminding me of your Skink Nose episode where Skink Nose took one of your player characters' party members' souls as a hostage,
Right.
basically, until you did some other quest for them to get it returned. So basically, you're thinking the same thing that perhaps Levity gives into her hunger a little bit because of this failure, kind of
Yeah.
losing momentary control, and basically is threatening your party with, like, I pick one of the members of the party, I'm going to feast on their whatever it is that I particularly hunger. It maybe you can decide for Levity what it is that she particularly thirsts after. If it's like a standard vampire, it might be blood or cerebral spinal fluid or raw meat or something. I mean, I know trigger warnings if some of that stuff makes you squeamish or whatever, but we're not trying to get into too graphic of details.
I would say for blood,
Okay,
that's something that can replenishes itself eventually.
sure. Kind of similar to Blade. I mean, Blade did have to consume blood too, but not to the point of like the vampires he fought that were like feeding
Right.
on whole people.
Right. And then that sort of makes their punishment, I guess I would say worse because it's just sort of like you're there for as I need you and like you're this it's going to be a long-term punishment.
And is there a way that the party can correct this, fix this, so that way they can free their ally? Like if they finally show up with the vampire, that'll solve it. Or if we're imagining, oh, the vampire's dead, and now I'm stuck in this damn fear state, and I can't
Maybe
finish going either way or something.
maybe finding somebody else in the sire line that may be able to help.
Ooh, okay, interesting. Now we're having to do vampiric genealogy. Okay, hold on. Let me pull out the parchment scrolls and figure out how far back this goes.
Well, this is just off of some vampire lore that I know is that is usually they'll have at least one companion within their sire line with them.
Hmm.
My assumption would be if they killed the main one,
Hmm.
hopefully someone in their sire line is there and it's not like the sire line where like the sire dies, everyone dies.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was gonna say I hadn't even considered that, but yeah, would that actually put her at stake as far as like it makes her weak or something like that because now her sire is dead, and either way of what she needed, if she was going to become a full vampire or she's going to restore herself back to humanity.
I would say it's like a broken sire. Dhampir to me just means they don't have a full sire bond. So
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily think it would affect her. And so I would assume that maybe they have like a broken sire bond, but they're still like, we're not like that bonded, but like I'll still hang out with you.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so the consequence of failure is she's going to take one of the party members hostage as her personal blood bank unless they can either bring the vampire like they need to, or they find another vampire somewhere in the lineage that she could use to either, again, turn into a full vampire or restore her mortality back, basically.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we learned a lot about this terrifying Levity I thought was going to be a wholesome character, but it completely turned on us. But just like how she almost sort of turned too. But it's now time in the show where we go to a random encounter. All right. And so the random encounter at this point does not have an ad sponsorship. But if you would like to change that, feel free to send me an email, sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. And I would be happy to listen to your proposals and work out something so that way you can sponsor an episode segment, the random encounter segment. So I hope to hear from some rich noblewoman or eccentric lord soon with their Kickstarters or Patreons or whatever else. Okay, so the random encounter section, you'll recall, is where we get to do a little bit of a vignette, a little role play, a little bit of theater with our character that we've made. So I think you will do a fantastic job with Levity. But the question for me is, what character am I going to be in the scene opposing you or being alongside with you? Am I going to be one of my adventurer characters who's going to get tasked with 1v1ing a vampire to bring back to you? Am I the sire? And we're doing a flashback scene of the moment where the transformation went wrong. Or is it going to be kind of like an everyday scene where maybe it's a class discussion and, she's hearing about the corrupt officials in the town, or the piece of knowledge gets dropped about like her sire is somewhere nearby in the area. And that's is what gets the wheels spinning as to, okay, well, I need to find someone who can either go with me or can go take care of this myself while I go deal with the other threats that I'm dealing with.
All right, we've already started this complicated train. Let's do the flashback. I like that idea.
Okay, the flashback. Okay.
Yeah.
And so then I'm going to be some type of male vampire. Did you have a name in mind for who the sire was?
I do not.
Well, I could solve this really quick. Fantasy name generator. We've got Thaddeus, Leandro, Magnus,
Ooh,
or
Magnus.
Sova. Magnus.
Yeah.
So we've determined that the sire's name of Levity is Magnus. And so we're doing a flashback scene.
Just like a small village on the outskirts of like the larger city. And we'll say that, going back to your thought of Levity being a wholesome character, I think she starts out that way. So she's probably just a young girl who likes to spend her time maybe out in a meadow near a small river where she likes to sit with her books and learn. And that would be where she first meets Magnus. He sort of sees her and approaches her as a random traveler, just striking up a conversation.
Yeah, I think Magnus is the kind of guy that, takes the nice fancy carriage out. Is this in the evening time where he's able to do this, or is he so bold as he actually does go out into the daylight, but he has like a big umbrella or something that just protects him from the sun?
I would think that he's bold.
He's bold.
Yeah, I would think with people with a name like Magnus, I typically think of him as very bold, and he's probably been around a very long time, so he's not afraid to take chances.
Okay. And so typically I believe with vampires in 5e, if they're like in an area, they do affect the local climate. So maybe it's not quite as dour and gloomy today. It's maybe like overcast, and so he might still have to bear an umbrella or something like that, but he's feeling rather aristocratic. He's out in the carriage ride around the countryside, and then he beckons his driver to stop, and he'll get out and he will approach, Levity in the meadow where she's reading and studying. And he just kind of puts on this this fancy air and all of his charm. And it's just like, well, my dear, what are you doing out here in this meadow? Just reading by the roadside.
And then she would respond with, "Good day, my lord. I sometimes like to sit out here, learn the many languages of people who live outside of my village as a way to connect with the outside world."
He's impressed, piques his interest because he hasn't maybe met anyone like this before. And so he'll just be like, oh, quite fascinating. And what language is it that you are taking in today?
Today is the language of the Elvish people.
Ah, yes. And so he'll start conversing in Elvish to kind of test her level of intelligence. And so maybe he says something to the effect of like, I find Elvish is best in the songs and poetries of old. It really captures their essence and quality.
And I would respond that I would agree, as the Elvish people are a very passionate and vibrant people.
Yeah, probably something that he hasn't done with someone who's like taking his focus like this in such a long time. He's still trying to play it cool, like as if he is the good guy, putting the charms on. And so then maybe he like actually sits down next to her, and maybe some of that vampire sort of like washing over aura effect or whatever. And so he's just trying to lay on the charms and just be maybe say something along the lines of like, well, my dear, I have a multitude of books on this language of this field of study and many more in my manor, in my abode, and I could teach you many languages of the world and even more things that you can't study in books. So he's trying to lay it on a little thick, seeing if perhaps like his pure machismo and charisma can kind of win this young maiden over.
Yeah. I think she would be a bit hesitant at first because this is a strange man that she's just met. But also, her family's, she's never been outside of her village, and she'd be afraid to leave her family behind to go and study what she imagines is a great collection.
In this particular flashback, is this the instance of where, she's attacked and turned? Or is this just like their first meeting? And then this is going to inspire a series of later meetings that's going to eventually lead to that event. I just wanted to know the dial of like how much is too much.
This would be the what essentially gets him to convince her to go, where it would be he would manage to convince her to go without having to tell her parents. He'd be like, "Well, I just live up the road. If you'd like to borrow some books, we could return you home." Just sort of making her think like, "Oh, this isn't like a big thing. It's just, a couple of books you may not have."
Okay, so then he does that to that effect. So he tries to use his persuasion and charm, to make it seem as if it's not a big deal. And he'll say like, "Oh, come with me. I have many fine wines that you can lounge in a recliner, and you can read these books to your heart's delight." As if it brings him a great joy, as if he could do this for her. And then, however long she wanted to stay, then, oh, simply yes, we could return you to your village and your parents, but they would have no need or worry because I am the great Magnus. I am the ruler of these lands, and far be it from me or any of my subjects to feel threatened or not cared for.
Yeah, and so she would then feel more comfortable, like, "Oh, okay, well, obviously, there's no ill intent. He just wants to foster my learning." And so I, being the ever eager fountain of knowledge that I am, would be like, "Well, yes, okay. As long as I'm able to return before dark, I will gladly follow you to where these books are."
And then, yeah, probably for Magnus, this is like an instance of him. Whereas most of the people under his rule, he views them as like, cattle or dinner or something like that. This is like an instance of him actually being like, could I consider her an equal? Could she be something more than just my next meal? And so, it's like the super focused zoom in on the neck. And so, like, the arteries are pulsing and he feels that temptation, but he quiets himself, he steadies himself, and he thinks like in his inner monologue, like, no, she could become my bride. She could be the one that rules with me side by side. Or if not, she would be the beautiful flower next in my my harem or whatever we're imagining this Magnus gentleman to be like. He has this inner dialogue going on as he's escorting her. He lifts her up effortlessly with his one hand, and maybe she's even surprised with like how strong or flexible or fast or fluid in his movement that he is. And so he'll just like walk very much like a gentleman and lead her into the carriage. And are there any other moments or things that she'll say before this first meeting instance of them concludes?
I don't think she'd so much say anything verbally. I think it would be more so in her actions, where, she just takes one last glance back at the meadow, thinking that this is the spot where my life changed. Because again, he is offering her a chance to learn more, and she just has this feeling that meeting this man has essentially changed the course of her life. So she's aware that there's a change coming, but she may not necessarily acknowledge or understand that it's not necessarily for a good reason. Like she has that feeling of like, oh, something big is happening, and this is the moment that change occurred. And so for her, it's more like an excitement thing without realizing like the danger that she is walking into. Sheep in the lion's den more so.
All right, and I think that scene, yeah, I think that sets up the backstory very well. So yeah, now I'm just interested to learn more about the dynamic between Magnus and Levity, then like where it went right and where it went wrong, and maybe it's even like a spurned lover sort of a thing, possibly if you decide to take it that route.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of open to possibility there because, it could even be more so, he's kind of put her in this trance of, because you mentioned earlier that, like, he kind of has like his vampire charm and charisma. So I would imagine that over time she just sort of falls into a trance, but it's like the thought of her family and like her having to leave her family that sort of disrupts that. And that could be the action that
Oh, that
stops
caused her to become a dhampir instead of a full vampire.
Right. So like it sort of breaks that, like it's what gives her the fight to pull back, but she's already been halfway through the process.
Hmm.
That's why she's sort of like on the brink, because like maybe she was almost at that point, almost past the point of no return,
Hmm.
but not quite far enough to completely come back from it.
That's really cool. Yeah, no, there's some very rich soil here for your plots and your games and everything like that. So definitely, I would encourage you to take Magnus and Levity certainly and put them in your game. Very cool. Yeah. So, what did you think of getting to make Levity and getting to be back on the podcast?
I loved getting to make Levity. She's definitely she was a lot more challenging, I think, than Skink Nose. I feel like Skink Nose just kind of rolled out fairly easily,
Hmm.
but Levity, just based on just the initial things that we rolled out, I felt
Hmm.
like there were so many layers that you could potentially put with this character,
Hmm.
which would then take it in so many different directions, and that's kind of interesting to think of like all the different directions she could go.
Yeah, I love it too. Like the openness of how you want to take it. It's like, oh, am I getting my ex lover and I'm having to capture him to bring him to me? Oh, this is the man that promised me so much and I'm getting my revenge. Is it? Yeah, it could be any number of different ways. Or, oh, he's just the one that changed my life. And, I want to get back to my life. And so that's why I need him captured. But because he's this powerful vampire, he's been, beyond my grasp to actually get. And then that's why she needs the players to step in order to capture this vampire Magnus to bring him to her. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't wait to see. Definitely gonna try to remember all this, but I will come back to your little stories tab that I found earlier because I'm sure it'll be up there before I can get around to it. But I definitely would love to see where these characters go.
Yeah.
I consider myself an amateur writer. By amateur, I mean I have several books that I've started and have never finished, but
Hmm.
I like where this is going. So the writer in me is like, continue.
Sure, yeah, and I would encourage you if you wanted to write more on this and share it with us in the podcast. We'd be happy to post it on the subreddit or wherever else. And then that might give other players or other dungeon masters some rich fodder to be able to use for their games as far as like motivations and the dynamics between Magnus and Levity, the unwilling bride the ex-lovers, the failed vampire, or whatever the variation might be.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, as we're here in the final moments of the show, I always like to give the stage, the microphone, the soapbox, the platform, all that good stuff over to the guests. So if you want to be found on social media, where can we find you? If there's any projects that we need to be made aware of that we can, support you on, if there's any passions or causes that we need to be made aware of, let us know what those are.
I am still on Facebook and TikTok under Leigha Murray. I mentioned earlier, I have a couple of friends that are out here doing great things. So definitely look for Carter Anderson Comedy on TikTok. Give him a follow. He is hilarious. You will not go wrong. And then my two friends that do play D&D have also started a podcast where they talk about, discuss different webtoons that they're reading. And I believe it's called Splat. And you can find them wherever podcasts are available. So give them a listen. They're definitely very intriguing. My friend, their names are Amber and Ashley. And it's them and two other people from their D&D group, actually, that started this podcast. So definitely give them a follow. And keep playing Mortal Kombat so they'll keep making new games, because I'm here for that.
Awesome. Well, Leigha, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. Glad to have you back and glad to catch up, and can't wait to have you back on to make even more NPCs.
Oh, yeah. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sidekicks and Side Quests. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcast, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, and Overcast, or feel free to save the RSS feed to use the app of your choice. If you don't like using podcast apps and services, I'm proud to announce that I'm in the process of uploading the podcast to our very own dedicated YouTube channel, which you can find by searching for Sidekicks and Side Quests. All future episodes should automatically publish to our YouTube channel. Visit our website, sidekicksandsidequests.com, for links, write-ups of the NPCs, and to learn more about the show and the guests who have been on it. To stay up to date and interact via social media, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and the corresponding threads, Twitter, now rebranded X, and Reddit by searching for SideKQ Podcast. You can now also find a very tiny community on Discord as well. I would love to talk D&D and showcase your fan art, stories of how you used our NPCs, discussions, and commentary. If you'd like to hail the bard, simply send me an email at sidekicksandsidequests@gmail.com. To help this show be the resource it's meant to be, I ask that you please leave a review on iTunes, 5 stars if you please, to help spread the word and share our podcast with your friends and family. Whether you're a veteran player or an aspiring dungeon master, there's something here for everyone, and I want to hear about it. As mentioned in the NPC creation section of the show, I do in fact have a Patreon for the podcast. If you love this podcast and you want to help support us and take our show to the next level, I would appreciate it if you would go to patreon.com/sidekicks and sidequests. No matter your lifestyle expenses, we have wonderful rewards at every level of Patreon membership tier. Modest, comfortable, wealthy, and aristocratic accommodations await, and we welcome all patrons to the Levitating Platter. Seriously, your financial support allows for this passion project to continue to invest in itself through the tools that will take our production to the next level, as well as provide more content for our patrons and the community at large. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you can.
Sidekicks and Side Quests is unofficial fan content permitted under the fan content policy, meaning I'm not approved or endorsed by Wizards. Portions of the materials used are property of Wizards of the Coast.
Copyright Wizards of the Coast, LLC.
Thank you for your support, and I'll see you at the pub next time.
Bar to rock on 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sidekicks and Sidequests.